Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conscious Business Connections, brought to you by the New York City chapter of Conscious Capitalism. My name is Bob Caporale, and I'm joined today by Kelly McGlinchey of Table and Tilth, located in New York City. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here, Bob.
You bet. It's a pleasure. So I guess I should do a full disclosure to our viewers and say that Kelly and I have known each other for quite some time. I consider her part of my family. She's a fantastic, fantastic friend and just a great person. But Kelly, as you know, the purpose of this show is that we are highlighting local business owners, local companies who are practicing conscious business practices around the greater New York City area in hopes that you can share some of the things you're doing and other people can learn from what you're doing. And we could just hopefully spread this idea of conscious capitalism around. So before we get started with all that, tell us a little bit about Table and Tilth and what you have going on there.
Amazing. Thank you, Bob. So Table and Tilth is about 18 months old now, so still a very young business. I launched Table and Tilth as a consulting firm to help good food businesses in the New York City area grow their impact and cultivate success. And what that means in practice is helping fellow businesses with social impact strategy, sustainability strategy, and also general business development to get small businesses on the track for growth in their mission-driven work. So I work with a very specific clientele in the New York City landscape, mostly businesses that are sitting at that intersection of food and sustainability, for-profit companies looking to do good while also helping the bottom line with the work that they do.
So this is so awesome. And now, are you targeting companies of any size, or is it like the big companies that are feeding their employees on a regular basis, or it could be anybody?
I'll say sort of my entrepreneurial journey here with Table and Tilth, there is still very much a learning process for me and looking at where the need is and where I can fill a niche for Table and Tilth. Almost in my first, year or so now of business, I have tended to work with small businesses, or startups. So
Yeah.
really, and actually there's been a bit of a trend of business owners who have made a career transition. In fact, that's a common one of the clients that I work with, who are coming from often the financial sector or something similar and looking to break into mission-driven work, to put it one way, and food is that lens.
Yeah.
So CPG companies. Just started working with a pizza startup, right? So all different kinds of food businesses, but there is a general trend of these CEOs who want to create something that has meaning for them and for their work.
Yeah, which is really cool. So it could be anything from I have a big company and I'm feeding my employees through a cafeteria and I want sustainable food sources and things of that nature. Or it could be a small startup that is actually a food services company who wants to be providing sustainable food, right? That kind of a thing.
Yeah. And beyond that, what I think is interesting, and we can get a little bit into this, but, for a lot of the brands that I work with through Table and Tilt and through other hats that I wear in the city landscape, sustainability is not something that's sort of been tacked on because they're younger companies. It's getting woven into the fabric of what they do, of the story of who they are. And the work that they carry out. So it's a really interesting time now in 2020 from a sustainability perspective.
Yeah, it's really cool. Now, if you're working with a company, let's say it's a company that has a cafeteria and wants to feed their employees, right? And they want to feed them from a more sustainable food source. What is in it for the company? And this is a really important question, I think, right? Because I think most companies would say, well, let's get the cheapest thing that we can get because, this is a benefit we're offering, so we should do it as inexpensively as possible. Why would a company invest in what could be a more expensive alternative?
I mean, in the short, the immediate thing that comes to mind is you can charge more. I mean, there's definitely, here in New York City in particular, there is a large population of our consumers that will, pay more and have the ability to pay more for better quality food. So depending on who your customers are and who your target audience is, there's definitely a selling point and an opportunity to, by investing more in what you're selling, charge a higher price correspondingly in correspondence. I also think, one of the trends that I've observed and that I've been talking to folks in the industry more and more, even in just the past year or two compared to 5 years ago, the average consumer is expecting these principles and values in a different kind of way.
Yeah.
Even 5 years ago, when I think back 2015, right, to sustainability and these words around local, organic, knowing the source of your food, it really was a niche demographic that, and of course there still is a niche demographic that takes it to a different kind of level, but in a different way. Now my observations, this is colloquial, right, but my observations are that the average person is, has a greater orientation around these things, even if they don't really know why they necessarily want that GMO free chicken.
Right.
Let's say they want it. There's a value around it that is different now than I think even 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's kind of like intuitive, right? Like
Yeah.
you get this idea that you've been fed garbage, right? and you don't want that, right? And I think, like, even for a company, I went up to visit. I may have even told you this story before, but I went up to visit a large corporate client of mine, and they took me out into their courtyard, this new building that they built, and in the courtyard they were growing their own food that they were
It's great.
serving. Yeah, it was so awesome. And what they were saying, I was like, my first reaction was the same thing, like, doesn't this cost you more? They're like, yeah, but we care about our employees. We want to show our employees that we care about them. And so that pays us back in dividends, right?
Absolutely. Think about like Google. I think Google is like this classic example around their food program for a reason, because they literally, you walk around Google headquarters in New York City and there's just food everywhere, and
Yeah.
all different kinds of food. And to me, they take this sort of, this concept of good food beyond organic local to also talking about cultural relevance and food traditions. And so you can find, really interesting street food from all over the world in the, I can't even call it a cafeteria because Google headquarters has food just literally everywhere. But they do tie it to the wellness and the sort of employee care program or initiatives rather that they have.
Yeah.
Because it's, there's people need to eat. So it's a basic thing
Right.
that you can offer to your employees.
And they want to eat healthy. And I think at the end of the day, it's a key tenet of conscious capitalism, right? Is it take care of your employees, but that doesn't just mean monetarily or even culturally. It means also what you feed them, right? Making sure that their
Right.
well-being and their health is taken into consideration. So it seems like such a great thing. And then on the other side, like you say, companies that are trying to provide more healthy food alternatives to the world, that's an important growing market as well. One thing I wanted to talk about also is that we're obviously still in the middle of this COVID crisis, right? And you are right in the middle of downtown Manhattan. So I know you guys have been hit. I'm out here in the suburbs, right? This is the big secret. Conscious capitalism, New York City, but I'm still in the suburbs. So, but you're right down there, right? You're in the
I
core of
am.
Manhattan, and let me tell you, there's been a lot of talk about, boy, this is teaching us some things, right? Like, we need to be a little more self-sufficient and be able to take care of ourselves a little bit more. And so what before I get to what's kind of in your background there, but what's your thoughts on this? I mean, do you think that this crisis is going to cause more people to think about growing their own food, having their own gardens, like being more self-sustaining, without having to rely on all these external sources?
Yes, is the short answer. I have professional and personal stories that I'm going to weave in here. You- from a sort of a food, zooming out and looking high level at what is happening with our food landscape here in New York City, and then just more broadly across the country. What I've been putting it, we've been watching or seeing the vulnerabilities of the food system laid bare in a way we just can't avoid. It's in our faces. And I'll give you an example with a project I've been working on. So, when March 13th hit and it was announced that the schools were going to close in New York City, and then there was a ripple effect of schools closing all across the country. Obviously, that created some issues around our educational system, but the more immediate crisis that was created when the school shut down was food, because our schools have become absolutely critical feeding centers for a huge portion of our population. And
Yeah.
I'll zoom back into New York City. There's the number of students that were impacted overnight is incredible. And you zoom out beyond students, in a normal situation, around an eighth of the population of New York City is defined as food insecure, meaning that they don't have regular, steady access to nourishing food. They may have access to calories, but not necessarily food that, healthy food that is nourishing them.
Wow.
So, again, when these schools and other important community centers, shelters, senior centers were mandated to shut down, we suddenly found ourselves literally overnight in an absolute food insecurity crisis. So one of the ways that New York City on the government level has responded to that is creating what's called the Get Food program. It's an incredible logistical demonstration of the food system. And the way it works is they're partnering with local businesses, and I'm working with one of those local businesses to produce and deliver food to people who need it. So anyone in New York City, if they feel like they need food and they can't get it, they can dial 311 and ask for food and enroll in this program. And the way the city is handling this is they've converted recreation centers and the Armory and a few different points across the city into massive food distribution staging areas. Then what happens is the vendors that have been contracted drop off food, and the Army National Guard helps stage that food and packs it into taxis, because the taxi drivers are out of work right now.
Of course.
And they then take it the final last mile, right? The last mile logistics. They take it from that distribution center to individuals' homes. So it is an absolutely incredible program over the past 2 months has woven together, city agencies, again, the Department of Defense, local taxi drivers, and then small businesses who in a regular setting, I know a few vendors in this program that are, typically serving school lunch or doing catering for corporate offices. And they were, essentially out of business, again, overnight. So this program has allowed some companies who, who've been able to get a contract with the city to pivot. So, a very specific story to share. I think everything that's happening right now is showing us both the vulnerabilities, but also the opportunities we have with our food system. And it all, to me, it all comes back to those relationships. It's all, and when you have the relationships that allow some of these links to happen across our food system, it builds a stronger, a stronger system. And right now, the disconnection that we typically have in our food system, again, I think what we've been seeing in these past 2 months is that, maybe we need to go back to basics, reconnect with our food. And so to the second part of your question, I have had a surge of inquiries personally on how do I, start a garden? I want to grow food, no idea how, from people who have had no interest before, but, all of a sudden have time at home, time to sort of, again, to me, reconnect with the essential elements that make us human. And to me, that's food, and food ties back to the soil.
And this is what I think is so cool. And one of the things that I love about what you're doing, I want to zoom around in just a second, but is that, a lot of people think about, well, I have to have the big plot of land or whatever else to have a garden. And, we're doing food drives out here as well, because people have been decimated by this entire thing. And, we're bringing food to people and so forth. I'm part of an organization that's helping with that as well, but we're bringing prepackaged food that's probably not the healthiest stuff in the world to people that need it. And I always think whenever I'm, dropping some of that stuff off and saying, boy, people can be growing their own stuff, right? And that is an alternative. It's a relatively inexpensive alternative and can be done in any location. So why don't you zoom that camera around a little bit? Just twist that around. I want people to see what we're dealing with over here. This is now you guys are in Manhattan, right? This is downtown
so we
Manhattan.
are. My orientation, I've now, as I've been talking to people about this very topic of you can literally grow wherever you are, is that right now I'm sitting around 20 blocks north of Times Square. Central Park is directly to my west. So we're truly in the middle of Manhattan. And the space that I'm sitting in is 200 square feet. So I literally could give you a 360 tour. That section is kind of messy. So I'm going to give you a tour of this section.
Yeah, right.
But we've been here, for 3 years. I'm going to twist it around now.
Twist it around.
This is going to be our third season. in the garden. And you can see here, this is our main veg bed. It's just,
So cool.
6 foot by 2 feet, I think. And I've gotten 3 crops of radishes out of there this season.
Oh my God.
We have a little pond that's an upcycled container we found in the courtyard. Over in the corner there, we have cherry trees, raspberries, so perennials that come back every year. And then, it's, there's not much to look at right now, but up this wall in the peak season, we'll have beans and also some squash that I'll be trellising up the brick wall because it gets really good sun.
So unbelievable. And I know you guys have found, unique ways to do watering and capture rainwater and things of this nature. I mean, but, I realize that not everyone in Manhattan has outdoor space and things of that nature, but you don't need this much space even to do it, right? You could do it in pots, you could do it in community gardens, right? There's a lot of different ways to get at this, right?
You could do it in a windowsill. I mean, truly, again, I've been having these conversations a lot more and reflecting on my own personal journey in gardening, within New York City. And I've lived this is my 5th New York City home. And I have found a way, I was, again, in reflecting, to grow in every one of those. And a couple, 2 out of 5 had zero access to any kind of outdoor space. So, sometimes I've had, urban gardens where it's just a few pots and a sunny windowsill of some lettuces or greens or herbs. But even that, to me, it's about resilience. That's the opposite of vulnerability, right? And growing something, anything, one thing, to me is a really powerful act of resilience and of community. And imagine if we all, again, grew one thing, what would that look like for our local food economies? If nothing else, just to create that personal connection. For me, even with my gardening journey, it's helped me, I think, have better context and better understanding of what it means to grow food, the energy that goes in, the resources, the capital, the actual, the financial elements that go into running a farm business. Again, our farmers, I feel like, are I often say, some of our most unsung heroes, and they're business owners, right? A farmer is a business owner. And I think we sometimes lose that connection, especially in a city environment where it's easy to just, you go to the store and you have access to everything.
Yeah.
And for the first time in a long time, there's maybe limited access to pasta and flour and some basic things. Because again, all of a sudden people are going back to the basics. I keep saying the sourdough craze is upon us.
But it's true, I think, and this is the message. And that's why I really wanted to have you on the show, because I think this is where we're at, right? I mean, if this is teaching us nothing else, it's that there are other ways of doing things. And we're learning that in all facets of life. And this happens to be something that's really, really cool. One last question, and this might be a tough one, by the way, but if you were going to guess during your growing season, right? What percentage of your daily diet do you think comes from stuff that you've been growing yourself, more or less?
In the peak growing season,
Yeah.
Honestly, 2%.
Really? So it's still relatively low.
It is small. I mean, yeah. Again, the reality is I harvested, 6 ounces of radishes, and I was really excited about it. And the radishes, it was a nice little side. The cherry tree behind, we've got a cherry tree here and a cherry tree over there. Last season gave us 4 cherries, I want to say, but man,
ooh,
were
nice,
they joyously celebrated cherries, it's, so it's, again, to me, it's about the connection. I'm trying every year I try to take steps to increase that percentage, and 2 might be low on a given day. Again, it depends on what we're eating, but not more than 5, even in the peak seasons. And, again, I think right now I'm trying to focus on, it's called succession planting. So basically maximizing the use of these small beds so that as soon as something comes out, so as soon as the radishes are over, I'm planting the next thing and it's ready to go to really be optimizing that space.
But it's such a cool thing. And even 2%, that to me, that's a pretty good number, right? But it's 2% more that I'm growing myself, by the way. But but what I think is so
we can change that.
Yeah, I know we can. I'm sure we will. But what I think is so cool about it is that it just tells you that there is a different way. But if you can help companies to do this on a bigger scale, right, then imagine the impact that we can make. And I think that's what really some of this stuff is all about. So So Kelly, so great to have you on the show officially. So before I let you go, why don't you tell the audience where they can find out more about your company? Give them a web address, whatever you want to give.
Thank you. So you can find more information about Table and Tilth at tableandtilth.com or on social media at Table and Tilth. And I should have explained also, there's a reason for the name there. Tilth really has to do with the health of our soil.
Oh,
So again, it ties back to that connection point between what we eat, how we care for the earth, and the choices we make therein.
it's cool. It's a great name. I think it's awesome, especially with the
Thank you, Bob.
explanation. So really, really cool. It's great. So I also don't want to let our audience go without putting a little shout out for the sponsors of the New York City chapter, the Tomiak Foundation and the Core Club. Without your generosity, these programs wouldn't be possible. So we thank you for that. And we thank the audience for joining us on another episode. If you liked what you heard, you learned something, go ahead and give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends about it. The hope here is that we can spread the word about some of the great things that people are doing and others can learn from it. So hopefully you'll join us in that mission. And while you're doing all that, thank you again for joining. We'll see you back here in another episode of Conscious Business Connections. Thanks.